Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So going into this episode, I already knew there was going to be a Pussycats reunion, but I didn't know the circumstances, just how that was going to flow into the story, and it just obviously obviously we get Melody's opening where she's talking about, obviously she's her best friend, still tight with Valerie, which I think is kind of neat, despite them kind of going their separate ways. At least those two maintain friendships, and I think it kind of speaks more volumes about the fact is that they were able to stay so tight-knit while Josie kind of went off on her own. I mean, because you could even see that with the development of the show, where it's Josie's story, whereas the rest of the Pussycats kind of always fell to the wayside, and so it almost fit narratively to a certain extent. Because I never saw Katie Keene, sadly, so I don't know where her story ended up there. I mean, granted, it's still a 7-year time skip that they were able to do whatever they wanted, but I'd probably have a better idea, at least going into that 7-year time skip, of kind of where Josie was at the end of at least that one season of Katie Keene, but regardless, Melody wrote a book that's actually being adapted into a movie, and Valerie's going to be the star of it, or at least would be, because Tyler's no, kind of want someone else to kind of fill that role, because, I mean, that's how movies work. The fact is, sadly, people won't back a movie unless it's you have to have a big name associated with it, so, that's kind of always what you hear in that situation, so, but, at the same time, all that's happening, you hear about Josie disappearing on the radio. I'm like, wait, what? And then, she pops in Riverdale. And at first I was like, why did she come back to Riverdale after all this time? It's at first I didn't, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Also, I was wondering if she was going to be in this episode. I didn't see her, I wasn't paying attention to, all the people who were, starring in it, but I did see that Robin Gibbons was directing this episode. I was like, oh, that's so dope. I wasn't sure, like I said, I didn't know, I wasn't paying as close attention. I just happened to catch her name being the director, but she obviously is in this episode. But at first I was kind of yeah, this is kind of a nice, uplifting episode to a certain extent. I figured it would be with the Josie and the Pussycats, just because I'm with all the depressing stuff that's kind of going on in Riverdale, it needs a little bit of a bright spot, So Josie comes in, she wants to just record her new album and everything in the music studio in the Riverdale High, but it's oh, could you do a musical class thing? And she does. And honestly, her coming back to Riverdale, I forgot about a lot of things. I forgot about her and Archie. I forgot about her and Sweet Pea, dude. I was dude, it just feels like forever, even though it hasn't been. And that's the crazy thing about that 7-year time skip. I guess I'm letting it get in my head. It's it hasn't been that long since she left Riverdale. It literally hasn't. In the confines of the story, yes. In the production side of the show, no. So it's just kind of crazy to think about in that regard. Because it's been a while since we saw Valerie or Melody either. I think after Archie's dad died was the last time, at least, I think that's where last time I feel I remember seeing Melody, no Valerie, but maybe Melody too. I think that might have been the last time. I could be mistaken. Because it also got me thinking, I was right, I totally forgot Archie and Valerie were a thing for a while. Dude, it feels so far away in those regards, even though it's only been a couple seasons ago. But I'm right, I totally forgot those two were a thing at one point as well. But regardless, and everyone's kind of excited to have her back, and it's hey, Josie, oh, maybe you could help save Riverdale and stuff like that. And she's whoa, slow your roll. I just came back. She's honestly, you guys have all these plans for me and stuff like that. It's fact of the matter is, it's never really been my choice a lot of times. I'm making my stand here. I love her being we're closer to associates than friends. Because, and truth be told is, the same thing can be said about that core group right there. Because it's right, you all lost touch. It isn't just Josie feeling that way. It's they can't really say the same thing about each other. Those ties were cut for a while, and they hadn't seen each other in like 7 years, and she kind of put everyone on blast. As like, Veronica, you ain't called me in a hot minute. Betty, we had like one conversation. Jughead, the last time I saw you were robbing Pops in a serpent's mask. He's just kind of and then like, and Cheryl's like, yeah, you guys have no business talking to like a superstar like that. It's like, Cheryl, get off your high horse. You sent me a heart in a box. Cause remember that whole like thing, because at the time she was like obsessed with Josie. She was in love with Josie, but she didn't know how to get Josie, which I was like, right, I forgot, because that's before like Cheryl really kind of like, yeah, that was before Tony, I believe, and everything. So she hadn't really figured herself out. So it's like, yeah, Josie doesn't have the best, fondest memories of a lot of people in this. I mean, she didn't talk too negatively about Archie, because I guess they had their situations, but it's like, yeah, it's the least damaged relationship, I think, amongst anyone, because notice later on when she comes to talk to anyone about it, she brings it up to Archie. So I'm like, that's why I'm like, yeah. But it's like, yeah, she doesn't have the fondest memories of Riverdale in the first place. I even love that she was singing in her room. It's like, yeah, sorry. And Hiram's complaining. She's like, wow, Hiram, I didn't know you were still such a little bitch. I'm like, yo! And he's like, excuse me, what makes you this? She's like, once a little bitch, always a little bitch. And he's just like, she's like, the fact is you rolled up here in your jammies. It's like, yo, it's like, she ain't scared of you, dude. I'm like, I love that. And Hiram didn't have much to say. He's like, well, just keep it down. I'm like, you look so weak and I love that. That's like the open. That's in the beginning of the episode. I'm like, yo, Josie. Yo, a lot can change in 7 years, So it's like, all right, because Hiram kind of runs things and just kind of like, you ain't got no power over me, dude. Like, I have no like ties to Riverdale. You're not gonna bully me like you do this town or the people in it, So I personally just thought that was so interesting. Her calling up Valerie and Mel as well, like to talk to them. And at first, like, Melody almost like she like sent her straight to voicemail, because she was almost like, I didn't know how to react. Like, we hadn't talked in like ages. And Valerie picked up, and they roll up into Riverdale to talk to her. And she wants them to basically be on this one track on her new album, asking if they still perform, which obviously they go up there and kill it. It's like, Jesus, it's like, not just with the vocal talent, not with the dancing, obviously with the sex appeal too, dude. That's crazy. But also at the same time, it's like, when you're seeing that too, you can't obviously but not help but think about the like real world parallel. You're like, man, makes you just think about Destiny Child and like all the bangers that came out because of that group. It's like, because I forgot. I caught something recently. I don't remember what song it was. I mean, God, it's just, there's just so many. Dude, that was the shit growing up, Destiny Child. Like, I mean, dude, it makes me think about that, like, in that moment. Like, I mean, obviously we're talking about Josie and the Pussycats, and obviously that already being a thing in this universe, obviously already being a thing in general, but it just, you can't help but immediately think of, like, a real world comparison, and that being, Destiny's Child. I'm sure that's kind of like the parallel that they were probably going for Josie and the Pussycats, even more so than Josie and the Pussycats necessarily. Like, Val and Mel weren't too keen with Josie, because it's like, right, we kind of lost touch. It's like, you just kind of ignored us, kind of did your own thing. She's like, yeah, I'm sorry since it's like, no. It's not just before you left. It wasn't just when you left town of Riverdale. It's like, even before then, like, we had lost touch and everything. And now, Josie was kind of like feeling like you guys are 100% right. And so, especially for them, it's like, your dad was kind of a side man. Like, you would think because of his situation, you would at least treat your side women a little better. And, obviously for Josie, it's like, you can still, it's still kind of an open offer. But then, like, she had gone back to her room at one point in time, and there was her mom waiting. And the moment her and her mom looked at each other and started tearing up and hugging, I was like, her dad, it has to be. Because it's like, why would you just suddenly disappear? And it turns out, like, while she was on tour, her mom let her know. And I guess, like, maybe it was a situation. I mean, obviously, it brings up it being a heart attack. It was sudden. But also, I think it probably stems from, like, maybe she wasn't as closely. I mean, because her and her dad, we obviously know, like, they had their complicated relationship to a certain extent. Because she always kind of wanted to, like, have his attention and his notice, but she always kind of fell a little to the wayside. But I was wondering, like, maybe over the years they weren't as tight as they should have been, maybe, and I think maybe that's why it hit a little harder. But it turns out, when she explains it later on to Val and Mel about, like, yeah, that's why she came back to Riverdale, because she just wanted to get away, and she thought, like, you know, Riverdale would be the place she can kind of disappear into. Like, yeah, it has its issues and everything, but still, it just, you know, obviously so much has changed, you know, since she's been away from home. But also, like, talking to Val and Bill, she ended up bringing up the fact is that it's like, you guys were 100% right. My dad, like, I always felt like he always deserved to be in the spotlight, but he was always just outside of it. And it's like, because of that, that drove her to always want to kind of be in the spotlight to kind of make up for that. Like, my dad couldn't be in the spotlight, so I'm going to be in the spotlight for us. And, that was always what kind of drove that ambition for her. So, like, she had, like, there was actually a sweet reasoning behind it, but at the time, I don't think she ever really recognized. I think it took her getting older and everything for her to really recognize and realize, like, that was the driving force, like, why she kind of chose her stardom and kind of left her friends in the wayside. But it's like, right, I had no right to do that to you guys. And she's like, I'd give anything to be able to play one more time with my dad, or even, like, play with you guys one more time. And so they just ultimately decided to put on a one-time Josie and the Pussycats reunion. And, you know, they go to Archie for it, you know. So, once again, I think it speaks volumes that they went to Archie instead of anyone else. I mean, because that was the thing of, like, you guys are willing to give me a second chance. So, Josie's like, I'm willing to give other people a second chance as well. I want to help save Riverdale. It's like, yeah, this place has got its complicated history and everything, but it is still my home. I actually kind of sad, like, you know, Sierra being back and everything. And it's like, because we never really, like, had, like, there was never really a thing of, like, I guess her and, Sheriff Keller, like, never, like, because I was hoping, like, maybe he'd pop up in the episode just, like, get some response with that, but it's like, nah, I guess it's just they went their separate ways, too. Like, they never really, well, because they're still married, they got married, didn't they? I'm blanking on that, like, not less, like, that's something that changed in that 7-year period. I don't remember. Maybe they didn't get married. At least they were together. Like, the last time, continuity-wise, I think they were together, and the scene was them being together, so I don't know if that's something that changed over the 7-year period. But I would have liked them to have, but I guess it's like there's already so much in the episode, squeezing another storyline like that in probably would have been a whole thing. It probably wouldn't have been able to get the spot like it should have been getting, so. But, at the same time, this is all going down. I did appreciate, because obviously, like, Tabitha's like, right, because of, like, Josie showing up, it inspired me to do what I originally came to Riverdale to do, like, to franchise Pops. So, she asked to give her nest head to Veronica, which Veronica could have done the scummy thing and be like, yeah, sure. But then she was honest with him. They're like, no, I have my financial situation. I got to, basically, Chad, like, whole situation, he scammed a lot of people out of money in some Ponzi schemes, so now I have to pay them all back. And if the investors pull out, this house of cards could come crumbling down. And she wouldn't want the, like, Tabitha to, like, get dragged through that. So I was like, that's pretty dope, especially because it's like what Pops is meant to a lot of them, like that she was able to open that, like, speakeasy, which is now the White Room and everything. So it's like that all worked out, like, you know, so it's like she and so many people owe Pops, so she would never put Pops in a situation where it could be in danger. So I think that's kind of a neat element to it. And so, but Veronica doesn't have much of a choice when Alexandra, another investor, decides to kind of try and pull out her money, but it's like, hey, what about restaurants? And she's all about it, but then it's kind of like she wants to make some changes. She has, like, that horror, like, they sing the Little Shop of Horrors, and you see Kevin in the background, like, yeah, because, like, this is kind of his jam too, so I think this would be, you know, I wonder, did he help orchestrate any of that and stuff like that? Was that just all, like, Alexandra, Tabitha, and Tony doing their thing? Like, was that more on them? Did he contribute? I'd like to believe Kevin probably contributed in that just because of who he is, but Alexandra wants to change too much, because she's like, right, the milkshakes that Pops is known for, it's not going to, we're actually losing money on it, so instead of using actual milk, let's use instant milk, and they'll cut down the cost. And she wants to do this, she wants to do that, like, when changing it, which Tabitha's like, no, we're not going to do that, because that's its signature. And it's like, it's just a milkshake. It's like, no. When Pops opened, that was the only thing that it sold, what it was known for, was that one item, because that's what it sold, chocolate milkshake. And it's like, that milkshake is what it was known for. And it's like, it's my great grandfather's, like, it's been a generational thing. Back when, like, this was the only black owned business in Riverdale, when it was like the only place people like you and me could be, so it's like, for you to kind of come and ask to change that, no, I can't be a part of that. And this pulls out a deal with Alexandra, like, hey, I need my money. It's like, Veronica's like, sure, you can get it tomorrow. Granted, I think it's a situation of, she probably could have gotten the capital together, maybe, because obviously she was stalling, because for one, she needs all that money in one spot to kind of pay off the right people. So pulling out anyone's money would hamper the deal, because that any one person, because like, if she has to like get her money back, other people might start getting antsy as well and start wanting their money back. So you kind of get the feeling like this is all going to come collapsing down at some point, because I doubt it's all going to go super copacetic for Veronica. But obviously Josie and the Pussycats being on stage, which I love, like Betty being like, Dr. Curdle Jr., like, did someone die? He's like, oh no, I'm just a big Josie fan. And Weatherby's like, me too. I'm like, I love that. That's so awesome, because like when Josie showed up, Weatherby was like giddy with joy, and it's like, oh yeah, because you never get to see him giddy like that, especially after the whole Edgar thing. Like, that kind of left the man kind of messed up, but and considering everything going on with Riverdale, not many people have reason to be giddy, so him being giddy like that was so interesting. And also Curdle Jr., because even at the end you see with the sign and everything running with them, it's like, he's a huge massive fan. I love that. So, but like I said, bring a little spark and joy to Riverdale, because also Josie had gotten like her dad's her mom had given her like her dad's songs, like the ones he never was able to record and stuff like that. And so she also has his ashes, which he wants spread to every place he's ever been in Riverdale. Not just Riverdale, but all the places he loved and sang at. So like, those were his final wishes. So Josie wants to do that. But to do that, she wants to go on tour with Valerie and Melody, because like after like finding out about her dad, she's like, I couldn't perform. So I think she probably just like in that moment, but also currently, I think this time away was kind of a good start for her, because it led to her like reuniting with people. I mean, even this whole thing with Valerie and Mel, like Melody being like, I had to be honest with you, Val, just because like running into Josie reminded me like we're such good friends that I have to be honest with you. And so Tyler wants a star in that role, and she's like, I understand, like whatever it takes to get your movie made, but for her it's like, no, like this role was meant for you, so like if Tyler's not going to make it, then we'll find someone else to. And I'm like, I thought that was pretty sweet, and obviously they've got their like significant others in their lives. She's got Nancy, Valerie's got Alan, who wants to get married, but Valerie doesn't want to get married. She was kind of in between, but she kind of made it pretty clear. But doing what she's doing, Josie wants to kind of go on tour with them. It's like, no, you wouldn't be an opening act. We'd all three be headlining together. And it's like, we go to all the different spots so I could spread my dad's ashes, So it's both, a personal, and I think it's nice to have like her besties, like them being reunited and everything, and them going along on this journey with her. I think it's very important for her to have that kind of support system around. I even love the whole thing of like, yeah, Tony finally went into labor, which is like, yeah, we're always getting upstaged by something. At least this time it was a baby instead of a dead body, So, but I thought it was neat, It's just kind of like, once again, kind of like a hey, everything kind of like, once again, it's kind of an uplifting episode for the most part, because you're like, there's some sad parts to it, but when she was able to sing one of those songs, and seeing her dad, it was like kind of an honor of her father, like I think that was beautiful. Once again, kind of sad it got cut short by Tony giving birth to a boy named Tony after her grandfather. So I thought that was nice. Obviously, that's going to be an interesting circumstance considering where Kevin and Fang are, like with the whole Tony thing. But I think also it's a situation of like, yeah, we're mature enough adults to kind of make that be able to work out regardless of where Fang and Kevin, because I think Kevin's probably in a slightly better place because of the whole like Cheryl and the church thing. So that was neat. I'm wondering, is that going to play any role with Cheryl and Tony? Like, whether anything will come about because of that too. We'll see. There might still be some open room in that. But I did like that, Sweet Pea decides to go on this journey with Josie, which I'm like, oh, that's pretty dope. That they, for him, it's like, I could be your roadie, I could be your driver, I can be your anything. And she's like, all right, so rekindling those flames after all these years. Because at first it's kind of like, oh, it's just kind of a, it's kind of what we both needed. And, so. But, yeah, like, obviously them all making, is like, right, like, you guys should come, like, check out some of our shows at some point in time, or let's stay in contact this time. Veronica being like, oh, I'm gonna live vicariously through you, which, because all of this whole experience made Alexandra being like, yeah, if you have, like, Josie, like, a big star like Josie endorsing it, then I can be behind, Pops getting franchised, and also no changes to the milkshake. So, so that kind of all worked out for both Veronica, but also for Tabitha as well. Hopefully this doesn't come blowing up in their faces. Get the feeling like it might, but still. So, like I said, overall, it's very, like, it's like, very positive, everything works out. Until the end where it sets up, like, oh, yeah, so your dad was in New Orleans, might not have just been a heart attack, like, he was mixed up in some stuff, mixed up with some bad people, some voodoo, and was like, because even her being like, yeah, there was actually, like, just the moment being like, oh, well, nothing bad happened while we were in Riverdale. Home dude rolls up to be like, yeah, bad news about your dad. So it's like, right, it's like, because we've been in Riverdale so much, like, no death is ever just a death in the sound. Like, there's always going to be murder, is always going to be at the top of the list, potentiality. So they have even more reason for New Orleans to be their first stop, so. And obviously for Mel being like, her voiceover being like, right, 3 friends reunited again, and don't forget our names were Josie, Valerie, and Melody, the Pussycats, even had that logo at the end. So, which I'm like, okay, so is this supposed to be like a backdoor pilot in a sense for like a potential spinoff? I don't know if that's something like that's already greenlit, or was that just kind of a wink and nod setup for that in the universe, or what? Just because obviously, like, sadly things didn't work out with Katie Keene, so I'd be surprised if Riverdale would do another spin-off. I mean, I guess some argument you could be making, like, maybe, I mean, it could easily be like a chilling Adventures of Sabrina, but that was kind of like, it's its own thing while also being slightly associative of a spin-off. But obviously, like, Katie Keene was a more direct spin-off, because Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is kind of its own thing. It takes place in I would make the argument it's just like a parallel universe, because that's all like in the Archie verse of the comics, but you get what I'm saying, like, it doesn't take place in the actual same continuity. But I was wondering, like, I'll look into it more after I finish recording this, but I just don't see the CW doing that, because nothing against the Pussycats, because I think that'd be interesting, especially the way they're setting it up. I was like, oh yeah, these mysteries, because it's like, if my only association with the Pussycats was like the old school cartoons, because I think they get into like some Scooby-Doo like adventures type of things, like, oh, we're singing and everything, but we also like get caught up in bits. We kind of do our like Scooby-Doo / Nancy Drew type of thing. I think if I'm remembering the old school cartoon, like, once again, like, that's my only experience with the Pussycats. It's like I said, the old school cartoon. But other than that, it seems like that, regardless, like, if they were to make a Pussycats show, like, I think that would be essentially what that would kind of be like. Oh, them solving mysteries and dealing with like Josie's like maybe like supernatural stuff, maybe, or at least some mystery stuff of like, maybe not necessarily supernatural, only throwing it out there because like the guy mentioned voodoo, so I'm just like, maybe there's some correlation there. But also the whole point before I was going on that tangent, like, I don't see the CW greenlighting that, only because they've kind of passed on a lot of spin-offs lately that, like, like, but a lot of that's been like superhero related. So I don't know if like there's been, because I know there's other talks about certain spin-offs, because I feel like the Vampire Diaries, I mean, I guess to a certain extent you could say like, well, the Arrowverse, like, even though they haven't gotten the spin-offs, they probably were that were like, like Green Arrow and the Canaries, or Painkiller. Like, you could make an argument like, well, The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow were spin-offs, so, and they're still alive and kicking and working out. So like, it happens, and obviously like the Vampire Diaries, because we got the originals, and then we've got Legacies currently, so it can work out, but it just like, part of me, you know, it's kind of like, because Katie Keene didn't, I'd see them less likely to greenlight, not less something else, like not another platform like a Netflix or HBO Max or whatever decided to do it, not unless it was something like that. Once again, I haven't read anything about it, I'm just going by like the episode, and I'm like, just something I'm curious about. Like I said, I'll look into it more later on, but like I said, just kind of like considering all the depressing stuff in Riverdale, it's kind of nice to have like at least, like I said, like a 90% uplifting episode in that regard. So that was just kind of an interesting way to bring them back into this world/universe. So that was pretty dope. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.